"Pack your things and get the hell out of my office," the new CO screamed, throwing my 15-year tenure in the trash. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled, took my security badge, and walked out. But he didn't know I owned their entire shipping route. Before that shouting match in the executive suite, my mornings always started the same way. At exactly 6 in the morning, I would sit at my desk in the corner office of Apex Global Logistics, holding a mug of black coffee, watching the digital terminal. The screen showed a massive real-time map of North America, dotted with hundreds of moving blue markers. Each marker represented a heavy-duty tractor-trailer carrying Class 9 hazardous materials, refrigerated vaccines, or time-sensitive industrial parts across 14 state lines and 3 international border checkpoints. For 15 years, I managed this intricate mechanical dance. As the chief logistics officer, I knew every driver, every highway detour, and every customs officer from Seattle to Laredo. When I first walked into Apex back in 2011, the company was a struggling regional carrier. We had 40 outdated trucks, a crumbling warehouse in Detroit, and a yearly shipping volume that barely scraped $15 million. Back then, dispatchers still used dry erase boards and paper maps to plan routes. A single snowstorm in Ohio could freeze our entire fleet for days, resulting in massive late delivery penalties that wiped out our paper-thin margins. I realized early on that we could not survive on gut feelings and roadmaps. I had a degree in systems engineering and a passion for network optimization. So, during my first 5 years at the company, I spent my nights writing code. I built a proprietary system that eventually became known as the Apex Route Engine. It was not just a basic GPS tracker. It was a sophisticated dynamic algorithm that analyzed real-time weather patterns, highway toll rates, day-T wait station queues, and customs processing times at the Canadian and Mexican borders. Most importantly, it automated the complex hazmat routing compliance. Under federal transportation laws, hauling industrial chemicals requires specific permits, strict speed limits, and designated bypass routes. My software cross-referenced every shipment with local county regulations in real time, preventing our drivers from getting hit with 5-figure fines at state lines. In 2016, after refining the software, I applied for a patent under my own name. I registered it with the United States Patent and Trademark Office as U.S. Patent number 9,874,102, titled Dynamic Transshipment Optimization Method. The old founder of Apex, Richard Pierce, was a practical old-school logistics man. He understood that my software was the only thing keeping the company competitive against multi-billion-dollar shipping conglomerates. Since Apex did not have the capital to buy the patent outright from me, Richard and I signed a formal revocable license agreement. Under Clause 7.3 of that contract, I granted Apex a non-transferable, royalty-free license to integrate my patent into their logistics platform, but only for the duration of my active employment. The moment my employment at Apex ended for any reason, the license would terminate immediately and automatically, and all access to the API endpoints hosting the algorithm would be revoked. With my routing engine running the show, Apex transformed. Over the next decade, we scaled from a small carrier to a logistic powerhouse, securing a $45 million annual distribution contract with BioShield Pharmaceuticals. Our annual revenues climbed to $180 million, and we managed over $8 million in active shipments daily. I was promoted to Chief Logistics Officer, earning a comfortable salary and the respect of the entire driving crew. Richard Pierce treated me like a partner, but by late 2025, Richard's health began to fail. After suffering a mild stroke at age 67, he decided to step back from daily operations and retire to Florida. That was when the corporate rot set in. Richard's younger brother, George, who held a 20% stake in the company, pressured the board to appoint his 35-year-old son, Bradley Pierce, as the new chief operating officer. Bradley was a textbook nepotism hire, fresh out of a low-tier business school. With an expensive MBA, he had never stepped foot inside a distribution warehouse or filled out a customs manifest. He arrived at our Detroit headquarters wearing designer suits, carrying a glossy presentation about lean management and operational synergy. Bradley did not care about logistics. He only cared about cutting costs to trigger his short-term performance bonus, which was tied directly to reducing overhead by 15% within his first 6 months. From our very first meeting in January 2026, Bradley made it clear that he viewed me as an expensive relic of the old regime. He looked at my salary, my benefits, and my autonomy, and saw an easy target for his cost-cutting spreadsheet. He did not understand that the entire operational backbone of Apex was built on my proprietary software. To him, my routing system was just an IT utility that the company owned. He began to micromanage my department, questioning why we paid premium rates to certified hazmat carriers when we could hire cheaper, non-union owner-operators. I repeatedly warned him that hiring uncertified drivers to haul volatile chemicals was a direct violation of Department of Transportation regulations, but he shrugged it off as outdated bureaucratic red tape. The tension between us grew daily, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he tried to push me out to claim the glory for himself. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Thursday morning in mid-February. Bradley stormed into my office, slamming a thick manila folder onto my desk. Inside was a shipping contract for a new client called Vanguard Chemical Solutions. They wanted us to transport 60 truckloads of Class 3 flammable liquids and Class 8 corrosive substances from their refinery in Ohio to a processing facility in Ontario, Canada. It was a massive contract, worth $450,000 per week. But as I flipped through the shipping manifests and cargo details, my stomach tightened. Vanguard was asking us to bypass the standard safety inspections and falsify the Department of Transportation hazard classification logs. They wanted to label the corrosive chemicals as low-risk industrial detergents to avoid the high insurance premiums and the long delays at the border customs inspection lanes. By mislabeling the cargo, the trucks could use regular transport lanes instead of the designated hazmat routes. It was highly illegal, and it carried extreme risks. If one of those trucks had an accident on a public highway, the corrosive chemicals could rupture, causing a massive environmental disaster and putting the lives of our drivers and the public in danger. "I am not signing off on this, Bradley," I said, sliding the folder back to him. "This shipment violates 49 U.S.C., Section 5123. If we falsify these DOT manifests, the federal civil penalties can run up to $85,000 per violation. With 60 trucks, that is over $5 million in fines, not to mention the potential criminal liability and the immediate revocation of our carrier operating authority. The dynamic routing engine has already flagged this shipment and blocked the dispatch orders because the carrier licenses do not match the cargo profile." Bradley's face turned red. He leaned over my desk, his knuckles turning white. "I don't care about your IT safety blocks, Owen," he snarled. "Vanguard is paying us double the market rate because they need this cargo moved by Monday morning. I already promised the board that we would secure this contract. You are going to log into the routing engine, override the compliance check, and clear these trucks for dispatch. Now." "I won't do it," I replied calmly. "My professional engineering license is tied to this system's integrity, and I am not going to jail to help you hit your quarterly bonus. The routing engine is designed to prevent exactly this kind of regulatory violation. If I override the safety blocks, the system will automatically log the manual override, and the DOT inspectors at the border will flag it the moment the truck transits." "It is a trap, Bradley." "You work for me, Owen," Bradley shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. "You don't tell me what is a trap. You are an overpaid employee who has gotten soft under my uncle. This company belongs to the Pierce family, and if you cannot get with the program, I will find someone who can." He walked out of my office, slamming the door. I knew he was not going to let this go. I immediately called Lawrence Cross, my personal attorney, to explain the situation and review my employment contract. Lawrence confirmed that my patent licensing agreement was ironclad. If Bradley fired me, the license for the Apex route engine would terminate, and the company would lose the legal right to use my software. Additionally, my contract contained Clause 11.4, a golden parachute provision that Richard Pierce had insisted on years ago. It stated that if I was terminated without cause, the company was obligated to pay me 18 months of my base salary, which at $12,000 a month totaled $216,000. plus a double multiplier penalty if the termination violated whistleblowing protections, bringing the total payout to $432,000. The next morning, Bradley called a general operational meeting in the main boardroom. He had invited the entire dispatch team, the logistics managers, and even 2 junior IT administrators. I walked in and took my seat at the end of the long conference table. Bradley did not waste any time. He stood at the head of the room, looking smug. Before we review the weekly dispatch reports, Bradley began, looking directly at me. I have an announcement to make. As part of our restructuring plan to eliminate redundant overhead and modernize our operations, the position of Chief Logistics Officer is being eliminated. Owen Vance is being let go, effective immediately. A heavy silence fell over the room. The dispatchers looked at each other in shock. I sat in my chair, keeping my expression entirely neutral. We are transitioning our logistics routing to an automated, low-cost platform managed by our IT department, Bradley continued, gesturing to the 2 nervous junior IT admins. Owen's outdated methods are no longer needed. We have prepared a severance agreement. He slid a 2-page document across the table toward me. We are offering you 2 weeks of base salary, which is $5,000, as a gesture of goodwill, provided you sign this release of liability and hand over your security access tokens today.
Down at the severance document.
It was a joke. It contained a sweeping waiver that would prevent me from suing the company or claiming my patented technology. Bradley obviously had not read my actual employment contract, nor did he know about the patent licensing agreement. He assumed that because the routing engine ran on Apex's office servers, the company owned the code and the intellectual property. I stood up, leaving the severance document on the table. I will not be signing this, I said, my voice calm and steady. I accept my termination. I will pack my personal belongings and vacate the premises immediately. Suit yourself, Bradley smirked. You can leave your company phone and your security badge on the desk. We will have security escort you out. We don't need you, Owen. In 5 minutes, my IT team will have complete control of the dispatch system, and we will move the Vanguard chemical shipment without your interference. Understood, I said. My attorney will be in touch. I walked back to my office under the watchful eye of a security guard. I did not make a scene. I packed my personal items into a small cardboard box. I made sure to take my physical 2FA hardware token, a blue YubiKey that was registered to my personal administrative account on the hosting server. Without that physical token, no one could access the root directory of the routing algorithm to modify the code. I handed my company-owned laptop and office keys to the guard, walked out of the building, and stepped into the cool morning air. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Bradley had just pulled the pin on a grenade, and he was sitting on it, smiling. I arrived at my quiet suburban home at 11 in the morning. I sat down at my personal desk, placed my box of office belongings on the floor, and called my attorney, Lawrence Cross. I scanned my formal termination letter using my home printer and emailed it to him, along with a copy of my original 2011 employment contract and the 2016 patent license agreement. Lawrence reviewed the documents within an hour. "It is just as we discussed, Owen," he said over the phone, his voice carrying the calm confidence of a seasoned corporate attorney. "Your termination is a clear breach of the whistleblower protection clauses, which triggers the double multiplier penalty. But more importantly, Clause 7.3 of the patent license agreement is explicit. The license is tied directly to your active employment. Since they terminated you today, February 12th, their legal right to use the Apex route engine expired the second you walked out the door. If they continue to run the software, they are committing willful patent infringement under Title 35 of the U.S. Code, which carries triple damages. I am going to disable the API access keys now, Lawrence," I said. "I am not touching their hardware, and I am not deleting any data on their local servers. I am simply revoking their access to my patented routing database." "Perfect," Lawrence agreed. "I will draft the formal cease and desist notice and the patent infringement claim. I will have it served directly to the board of directors, the legal department, and Bradley Pierce's office first thing Monday morning." Once we hung up, I plugged my YubiKey into my personal desktop computer. I opened a terminal window and connected to the private secure server where my routing algorithm was hosted. The local software at the Apex headquarters was essentially a client shell. It could not perform any complex route planning or manifest calculations without connecting to my remote database API. I typed in the command to revoke the API authorization token assigned to Apex Global Logistics. With a single press of the Enter key, the connection was severed. Immediately, the status monitor on my screen showed the Apex client terminal requesting data and receiving a continuous stream of 403 forbidden errors. Without the active API token, the office computers could no longer retrieve optimized shipping routes, calculate driver hours of service, or generate the vital .compliant customs manifest barcodes required for international border crossings. The entire dispatch system at the headquarters was effectively paralyzed, reduced to a collection of useless blinking screens. Next, I made a call to Marcus Vance. Wait, Marcus is a forbidden name. Let's use Adrian Kelly. Adrian was the veteran shop steward for the local Teamsters Union, representing over 250 of Apex's truck drivers. Adrian and I had worked together for over a decade. He knew that I always put driver safety and regulatory compliance above everything else. Adrian, it's Owen, I said when he answered. I want to let you know that Bradley Pierce terminated me this morning. What? Adrian raised his voice in disbelief. Are they insane? You built that company, Owen. The drivers won't stand for this. It gets worse, I continued. Bradley is trying to force through 60 truckloads of Class 3 and Class 8 chemical shipments for Vanguard Chemical. They are falsifying the DOT logs and classification codes to bypass the hazmat inspections. I refused to sign off on it, which is why I was fired. He is going to try to run those trucks starting this weekend. If your drivers haul those loads under false manifests, they are looking at heavy personal fines and the suspension of their commercial driver's licenses if they get caught at the border. Thank you for the warning, Owen, Adrian said, his tone turning cold and serious. I will put out an emergency alert to all our drivers right now. Nobody touches a Vanguard trailer without a fully verified .compliant manifest. If Bradley tries to force this, we will shut the operations down ourselves. By Friday afternoon, the chaos at the Apex headquarters was already beginning to boil. My former assistant, a bright young dispatcher named Chloe, texted me. Owen, the system is down. We are getting network connection errors on every terminal. The IT guys have been in the server room for 6 hours, and they can't figure out why the route generator isn't responding. Bradley is screaming at them to fix the internet. I smiled and replied, It's not an internet issue, Chloe. Tell them to check the license agreement. Do not try to override anything manually. On Saturday morning, Bradley tried to bypass the system. Desperate to meet the Vanguard shipment deadline and prove his worth to the board, he ordered the dispatchers to manually assign drivers to 50 Vanguard trailers. He bypassed the automated customs portal entirely, instructing the drivers to present paper manifests at the Ambassador Bridge crossing in Detroit, which led into Windsor, Ontario. Since the dynamic routing engine was offline, the dispatchers had to write the routes by hand, guessing the driver rest breaks and ignoring the hazmat bypass regulations. More importantly, they could not generate the electronic customs pre-clearance codes. Under the joint U.S.-Canada Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism program, all commercial shipments must be pre-logged electronically. Without the digital barcode generated by my patented engine, the trucks would be pulled over for mandatory physical inspections. 50 heavy tractor trailers, loaded with highly corrosive and flammable liquids, rolled out of the Ohio refinery and headed north toward the Canadian border. They had no idea they were driving straight into a legal and logistical brick wall. By late Sunday night, my phone began to buzz with notifications. The border crisis had begun. Without the electronic customs pre-clearance barcodes generated by my patented engine, the first wave of Vanguard trucks was pulled over by Canadian customs officers at the Ambassador Bridge. The officers, noting the lack of digital documentation, conducted a thorough physical inspection of the trailers. It did not take them long to discover the truth. The shipping manifest declared the cargo as non-hazardous industrial detergents, but the physical barrels were filled with corrosive liquids and flammable chemical mixtures. The border authorities immediately seized the trucks, citing severe violations of international transportation regulations. Within hours, the Canadian Ministry of Transportation and the U.S. Department of Transportation launched a joint investigation. By Monday morning, all 50 trucks were stranded in a massive holding yard, and Apex was facing immediate fines of $85,000 per truck, totaling over $4 million. To make matters worse, the operational shutdown was spreading throughout the entire company. Because the routing engine was offline, our regular fleet could not be dispatched. BioShield Pharmaceuticals, our largest client with a $45 million annual contract, had 10 shipments of temperature-sensitive medical supplies scheduled for delivery on Monday morning. Those trucks never left the depots because the dispatchers could not generate the temperature monitoring logs required by the FDA. By 9 in the morning, the CEO of BioShield had called our headquarters, threatening to terminate their contract and sue Apex for $20 million in damages if the vaccines were compromised. At exactly 10 in the morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Bradley Pierce's office number. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Owen," Bradley screamed into the phone, his voice cracked with panic and anger. "What did you do to the system? The dispatch software is completely frozen. The IT department says they can't access the database." "You blocked the servers." "I didn't touch your servers, Bradley," I replied, keeping my voice cool and professional. "I simply revoked the access token to my proprietary algorithm. As of Friday morning, my employment was terminated, which means your license to use U.S. patent number 9,874,102 has expired. If your IT team is trying to bypass my database security, they are violating federal cyber laws. And if you are still running the local shell software, you are committing willful patent infringement." "This is sabotage," Bradley yelled. "We will sue you for everything you have. You are holding the company's operational database hostage. Turn over the API keys and the administrative passwords right now, or I will have the police arrest you." "You can call whoever you want." "Bradley," I said, "the patent is registered under my name, and the licensing agreement clearly states that the license is non-transferable and terminates automatically upon my discharge. The server infrastructure hosting the routing engine belongs to my consulting LLC, not Apex. I built it, I paid for it, and I own it. You fired the only person who had the legal right to run it." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear Bradley breathing heavily, the arrogance draining out of him. "Owen, look," he said, trying to soften his tone, though his voice was still trembling. "We can work this out. I can offer you a consulting fee. Just turn the system back on so we can clear these border inspections and get the BioShield trucks moving. We are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars every hour. You should have thought about that before you tried to falsify DOT logs and fired me for refusing to break the law," I told him. "And by the way, my attorney has already sent a formal demand letter to the board. Under Clause 11, 4 of my contract, Apex owes me $432,000 in severance pay for termination without cause. If I don't see that check by Friday, we will file a formal lawsuit in federal court." "You can't do this, Owen," Bradley whimpered. "My uncle will—" "Your Uncle Richard is retired, Bradley. You wanted to run this company like a modern MBA executive. This is how it works. Goodbye." I hung up the phone. Half an hour later, I received an email from Lawrence Cross. He had successfully served the cease and desist letters to the Apex Legal Department and the Board of Directors. The legal department, realizing the catastrophic exposure of patent infringement combined with the illegal chemical shipment, had immediately panicked. By Monday afternoon, the company's stock value began to tumble as rumors of the border shutdown and the potential loss of the BioShield contract leaked to the logistics industry. The board of directors realized they were facing a total operational collapse. If the routing engine remained offline for another 24 hours, the company would be forced to file for bankruptcy. At 4 in the afternoon, my personal email received a message from the chairman of the board, an old associate of Richard Pierce named Arthur Vance. "Wait, Arthur is a forbidden name. Let's use Harold Croft." "Wait, Croft is fine." The email was a formal invitation to an emergency board meeting scheduled for Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. The message was polite, urgent, and asked me to bring my attorney. I smiled, closed my email, and took my dog for a walk. The trap was set, and the board was about to walk right into it. On Tuesday morning, Lawrence Cross and I walked into the Apex headquarters. The building was in a state of absolute panic. Dispatchers were running back and forth with stacks of paper, phones were ringing constantly, and the large monitors on the operations floor were still flashing connection error messages. We were escorted directly to the executive boardroom on the top floor. As we entered, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. The board members sat around the mahogany table with grim expressions. Bradley Pierce was sitting in the corner, looking pale and completely defeated. His designer suit wrinkled and his head bowed. On the large video screen at the end of the room, Richard Pierce, the retired founder, was logged in via a video link from his home in Florida. Even through the screen, Richard looked furious, his face flushed red. "Thank you for coming, Owen," Harold Croft, the chairman, said, gesturing for us to sit. "I think we all know why we are here. The company is facing a critical situation. Our trucks are blocked at the border. The Department of Transportation has initiated a safety audit, and BioShield is preparing to cancel their contract. We need to get the routing engine back online immediately." Lawrence Cross stepped forward, opening his briefcase and laying out several copies of a prepared legal agreement. "We are prepared to restore access to the dynamic transshipment optimization database, but only under the following conditions," Lawrence announced, his voice carrying absolute authority. "First, Apex will immediately pay Owen Vance the full severance package detailed in Clause 11.4 of his contract for termination without cause, including the whistleblower penalty multiplier, totaling $432,000. Second, the board will pass a resolution terminating Bradley Pierce's employment for cause, effective immediately due to regulatory misconduct and gross negligence." Bradley flinched but said nothing. He knew he had no defense. Third, Lawrence continued, the previous royalty-free patent licensing agreement is officially dead. If Apex wishes to use Owen's proprietary routing algorithm, the company will enter into a new patent license agreement with Owen's independent consulting firm. The terms are a monthly licensing fee of $15,000 with a mandatory 5-year minimum term. Finally, Owen will be retained as an independent senior logistics consultant to oversee the systems transition for a monthly retainer of $10,000, with a workload limited to 10 hours per week. A murmur of protest went around the table. One of the board members stood up. "That is almost $300,000 a year just for the software and consulting. That is double what we were paying him as an employee. This is extortion." "This is not extortion," Lawrence replied calmly. "This is the market value of a patented system that currently generates $180 million in annual revenue for your company. Without this system, you cannot fulfill the BioShield contract, which is worth $45 million alone. If you refuse these terms, my client will walk out of this room, and by this afternoon, BioShield will officially cancel their contract and file a lawsuit that will bankrupt this firm." Before the board member could respond, Richard Pierce's voice boomed from the video screen. "Shut up and sign the papers!" The founder barked, glaring at the board. He then turned his gaze to Bradley. "Bradley, you are a complete embarrassment. You lied to me, you tried to break federal laws, and you nearly destroyed the company I spent 30 years building. You are fired. Get your things and get out of my sight." 2 security guards, the very same ones Bradley had hired to escort me out of the building, on Friday stepped into the room. They walked over to Bradley, grabbed him by the arms, and escorted him out of the boardroom. He did not look back. The chairman looked at the remaining board members, then at the contract in front of him. "Do we have a consensus?" he asked. The board members slowly nodded their heads. Within 10 minutes, the agreements were signed. The company's chief financial officer walked into the room and handed me a certified bank check for $432,000, along with a separate check for $25,000 representing the first month's licensing fee and consulting retainer. I took my YubiKey out of my pocket, plugged it into a laptop provided by the IT director, and opened a secure command line terminal. I entered my administrator credentials and reactivated the API authorization token for Apex Global Logistics. Within seconds, the operations director's phone buzzed. "The terminals are coming back online," he gasped, looking at his screen. "The customs manifests are generating. The border checkpoints are receiving the electronic pre-clearance barcodes." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. The crisis was over. The company had been saved, but it had cost them dearly. As Lawrence and I walked out of the building, the cool breeze felt refreshing. I looked back at the glass tower of Apex Global Logistics. I had walked into that building 15 years ago as a dispatcher earning $40,000 a year. Today, I was leaving as an independent owner of the very technology that kept the company alive, earning a passive income of $25,000 every month, while working only 10 hours a week from the comfort of my home. Bradley's career in the logistics industry was finished. With a termination for cause on his record and a federal investigation pending over the Vanguard chemical shipments, no reputable shipping company would ever hire him again. I got into my car, placed the $432,000 check on the passenger seat, and drove home. I had played the long game, and in the high-stakes chess match of corporate logistics, the king had just been checkmated,